Okay,
Yes.
Okay. Please pray with me. Gracious God, we thank you for this day, that this is the day that you have made, and we are rejoice and are glad in it. We are especially thankful for Reverend Hawkins, who has come to talk to us about how we as Presbyterians in particular can move in the world in order to create more love and more unity, that you have called us to do justice, to love mercy and kindness, and to walk humbly with you. And so, Lord, as we continue to strive to not just be listeners of your words, but doers of your words, we ask that you open our hearts to receive what you have given Reverend Hawkins to give to us today. These and other blessings we ask in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So Steve, you want me to go ahead? Okay, I'll take that for you. Well, I'm excited to be back with Bradley Hills again. When I first came into this position in January of 2017, I lived in Bethesda for about 6 months, and so would visit the church, and again, I preached there and taught to classes beforehand. A couple of things I want to do today. One, talk a little bit about the office, that the 2 offices that I direct, and then talk about racism in general and what are some of the elements of it. But really, want to say the bulk of it for Q&A, for conversation about things that the church is doing, things that you're doing. I'm really excited to continue to learn about the ministries at Bradley Hills Presbyterian Church, and in ways that we can be a resource to you, because when I go out, I don't go seeking ways that you can support our ministry, but really ways that we can support what you are doing, because you are the ones who are in local communities making a difference in the lives of people, and that's why we are here. So I have been in this position since January of 2017, and I originally came to Washington to be the director of our Washington office, the Office of Public Witness. But since that time, 3 years ago, the director of the UN office resigned. He took another position outside of the PCUSA. And so we merged the 2 offices together. So I now direct 2 offices, the UN office and the Washington office. And it's really just an honor and a privilege to be a part of these ministries, because the bulk of what we do on behalf of the church, on behalf of you, are justice ministries. And we do advocacy. And in a layman's terms, secular terms, lobbying, basically, but from a spiritual perspective. We do everything that we do as a spiritual discipline. So in DC, we are right across the street from Capitol Hill. How many of you have been to our DC office? So you are close enough that we can get everyone into the office, and would love to host you in the office. We are still working remotely, but we go in all of the time. Our office manager is there all the time. We'd love to do an orientation to the work of the office, and for you to see our digs and to just get a feel for how we operate. So we have a staff of 4 in DC. We have one vacancy for our domestic representative. And I think, has Christian Brooks done anything with the church? Okay, Christian was our domestic rep. She resigned in November. So we are now in the midst of a search that we're hoping to complete in June. But our domestic representative deals with the US. Any justice advocacy that we do that pertains to the White House, pertains to Congress, pertains to in education, this person does. So we don't do state or local advocacy because we don't have the bandwidth, for one. So everything that we do relates to federal policy. So a lot of our engagement is with members of Congress. But also this year, now during the Trump administration, there was very little engagement with that administration. With the Obama administration, there was a lot of engagement with the Obama administration. With the Biden administration, there's a lot of engagement. I will say it's right in the middle of the two. It's more that we receive information from the Biden administration. I don't know if they would appreciate my interpreting it that way, but with the Obama administration, we did, I think, have opportunities to give feedback more so. But during the Biden administration, we constantly are in communication with them. especially at the beginning when he first came in. He reestablished the faith-based and neighborhood partnership team that is to work with the faith community. And so we've had almost on a weekly basis some type of communication back and forth. And in the beginning, they were Zoom conversations. Now a lot of them are webinars. But I said that to say that we do have feedback from the Biden administration. And I've been invited to a couple of important conversations at the White House, primarily on the compound, on reproductive justice. When the word first leaked that Dobbs was going to be, had occurred, we had a conversation about how faith communities were dealing with issues of reproductive justice. Also was invited to the White House when the president had his celebration of the signing of Build Back Better. And so we have a lot of engagement. But again, most of our engagement, direct engagement, is with members of Congress. So we're always looking for ways to connect with them, especially with pending legislation. With Congress right now, just as you well know, the biggest conversation is on the debt ceiling, whether we can get that without the cuts that the House with Republican leadership is pushing for. We're against what McCarthy put out last week, his compromise with the president to raise the debt ceiling. Also, a lot of conversations on the farm bill, which we know is up every 5 years, and it's up this September. Farm bill is wide ranging, but most of it deals with food support, SNAP benefits, food stamps, and we try to prevent any cuts to any of the benefits and actually look for increases. So right now, well, overall, we have our issues that we work on because we represent the church. We don't determine for the church's positions. And so we can only speak on positions that the church has spoken on. So because the church has spoken so strongly on food subsidy, on healthcare issues along that line, we're very much advocating for a strong farm bill to come out. And we have our own issues that we as an office set up. But to be honest with you, whatever's been dealt with in Congress is usually where our attention is focused, because we want to either see that bad legislation is not passed or that good legislation is passed. And we also have an international staffer, Catherine Gordon. Catherine does all international work. So right now, a lot of the conversation obviously is on the Ukraine and the war there. We know that war broke out in the Sudan as well. A lot of conversations about that. So any international issues that the church has policy on, then we also have an office manager, and I serve as the advocacy director for both offices. And then very quickly, we also have a UN office that's our partner. And so we meet once a week online to talk about the work of the offices. And there always was a strong relationship between the two. Catherine does international, which links up with the work that the UN office does as well. So right, it was just a natural, it just made a lot of sense. I think they should have been linked for a long time, because we're the only offices that deal with advocacy, that deal with trying to have an influence from the church's policy positions, either globally through the UN or through the administrations in Washington, D.C. So that's the role that I serve. And again, I want to plant that seed that we are a resource for you. So if something is happening in D.C. That you want to have a further dig into, you want to have a conversation with us, we are available, especially with the Zoom environment. I mean, we are a lot more available now. And I've shared with those who were on earlier, I've got 2 meetings this morning and all made available because you do this on Zoom. And so I'll go ahead into the presentation now. So my understanding, we're going to talk about racism. That's why everyone came this morning?
Right.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm talking about what you want to talk about. Because
could I ask you to turn up your volume a little, please? I've had a request that you're not coming through real well.
Okay, it might be because I've got this thing, but let me pull my, I've got it up pretty high, but it makes my head so big. So can you hear me better?
A little bit.
Yeah.
It could be even louder. So Jimmie, so I just want to make sure, because I'm wanting to be mindful of the time, and it's not to interrupt what you have planned. But we had also the request about the resolutions that came out of the General Assembly, having some understanding of that it was really important to us that those resolutions came out. And when they, when the General Assembly finished meeting last summer, we really wanted an understanding of what the intention was for our denomination to do. So we were told you were the best person to talk to us about that. And so I understand, about dismantling racism. So if that's partly what you're going to cover, we really will be appreciative of that.
Okay, yeah, let's do that then. Steve, you can take the PowerPoint down.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, were there particular overtures that you were interested in? But let me talk a little bit about how it works. Once General Assembly acts, in every overture that is passed, usually there's an office that it is assigned to. So every overture that goes to the OPW or the UN office, we have to act upon between that General Assembly and the upcoming General Assembly. So overall, we will act on every overture that has been passed, that has been assigned to us. I know that dealing with issues of race, we have some of those. A lot about the overtures that were directly aimed at the Office of Public Witness came out of the Committee 11. The VIOL dealt with violence in America. So, and we were looking at those last week. And there are overtures and relationships between violence, obviously, and issues of race. I think some of them, and as I'm reflecting upon them, the one that dealt with the issues of incarceration, of violence in America, gun buybacks and direct violence. So overall, we have to act upon every overture. So were there some particular overtures that that you had interest in?
So with specifically, so I'm sorry. So basically there were about 5 resolutions that came out. And I'm not remembering all of them off the top of my head. That first there was an apology on the floor of the General Assembly that was a lament of past behavior in terms of slavery, the issues of slavery. And then there were some resolutions that specifically dealt with things that the denomination was going to address. One having to do with white supremacy within our denomination. So investigation into that, education in terms of the whole denomination with respect to I think how we were going to move forward. That there has always been this issue that for the last, since 2016 that I know of, and maybe before that, that at the General Assembly, we would come out with these resolutions, with these statements about how the church should have been moving further ahead in terms of dismantling racism, that the church should have been taking the lead and had been remiss. And so and that's why we were just really excited when we talked about it in the Planning Committee for Adult Ed, that this seemed that it was going to be a new, a new direction in terms of not just saying the words, not just saying this is what needs to be done, but with the new moderators, that there was just really a lot of energy behind actually taking action. And so I remember when the moderator came at the end of last summer, she was very excited about what she would have the ability to do, that she and the other co-moderator, as far as moving the needle. So, and then I think the last one was reparations, were things that you were going to be looking at. So we just didn't know. I mean, the resolutions were there. We looked for more information about what was happening. And the thought was, we just could hear it from you, what was going on and what has been done since June. And maybe what the intentions are until, we meet again. I guess that would be in 2025 or 2024.
Yeah. Okay, good. That helps. And if you or Steve could do me a favor, because I am on my iPad, if you pull up PC Biz, and it'll take you directly to all of those overtures. So do one, because I can't pull them up on my iPad. But let me say this: one of the things that I would recommend to the congregation to do, for those who don't get Presbyterian News Service, to sign up for that free subscription, because that is really a good way to keep informed on the work of the church through the different program ministry agencies, because everything that you just mentioned, there's a lot of action going on in the church. And I would say that the church has not acted upon them. I would say in the past, but I think we have to go back probably 5-6 years. I think we could definitely make that charge. I would say since I have been here, there's been a lot of action dealing on issues of racial justice that have come out of the General Assembly.
What was that website?
It's PCBIZ Biz, and it should take you to it, and you should see. And I don't think we normally use it. What it does, it lists every committee of the last General Assembly, and you'll see in the top right where it says committees, and then you do a drop down and see the one on racial issues.
Okay, I'm at the Office of the General Assembly.
Uh-huh. Type in your search PCUSA, PC,
Right.
Yeah, hyphen biz.
Right, I'm now at the Office of the General Assembly at PCUSA,
Okay.
and I've got the summary of the 25th General Assembly.
Can you share that? Can you make that so that I can see that?
Sure.
Yeah, let's see what we got. Because I only say that because we could talk specifically then about the ways in which the church is addressing specific overtures, but I can talk in a general way. With the apology, a lot has happened about the apology. I've been out to the Presbyterian of Lakes in Michigan. We're in, there have been, that presbytery had me to come out to do a 3-day event on the apology where they read the apology. Yeah, let me put my glasses on. I can't see either. Yeah, that's not the yeah.
The only other word that begins with presby is presbyopia.
No, there it is right there.
Old people's eyes.
Yeah, that big box on the right that says PC Biz.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, click on that. Okay, and go to committees on the top left.
Got it.
All right. And then go to the right where it says select committee.
Got it.
All right. The race and gender justice, 4 from the bottom.
Got it.
And okay, go up. Those are all the overtures that came out of that committee. So we can talk about some of those, but the ones that you mentioned, again, talking about reparations. So there has been a lot of activity in the church dealing with this issue of reparations. So first of all, throughout, presbyteries have dealt with the no, I started talking about the apology first. I'm sorry. With the apology. So I told you I went to Michigan. We also have had several opportunities wherein we have engaged. Now, with the apology, the fact that it was passed was an action of the church itself. So most of the action that I've seen on the apology is that individual congregations and presbyteries have been issuing apologies either on the floor of presbytery, again, Lakes and the Presbytery of Lake Michigan has had quite a few steps on that. Let's go down to reparations. Where's the one on reparations? We have established an office of repair. The Reverend Jermaine Ross, R-O-S-S, what's Jermaine?
Okay, here's reparations.
All right, click on that one. And so so we have established an office of repair in Louisville, and that the whole work of that office. Now, Jermaine has been in that position about 4 months, maybe 5 months. And so that's his job, is to go throughout the church about ways that we can repair damage that the church has done racially in the history of this country. And reparations is a major piece of that. So I can send you, Pastor and Steve, Jermaine's email. And Jermaine is really the person that you would talk to about activities. He will be in DC in the first week of May to try to have some meetings with members of Congress talking about the issue of reparations. And I would dare say that alongside the apology, I think reparations is probably having more headway in the life of the church than any other justice issue. For example, if you look at our seminaries, many of our seminaries have taken steps dealing with the issue of reparations. Union Presbyterian Seminary, which has a Charlotte campus, and also it has a Richmond campus, has set aside $1 million in order to basically address the issue of racial injustice, ways in which that the seminary has benefited from slavery and from racism. And most of that will go towards scholarships and establishing offices. We know that Princeton has been a leader talking about reparations and has set aside, I think it's around $27 million to deal with the issue of reparations. Columbia and Georgia as well has dealt with the issue of reparations. So reparations right now is one of the major issues that we're dealing with. And so I said to you to sign up for PNS, Presbyterian News Service, because you can see plenty of articles. Once you sign in and get the subscriptions, there are articles on a regular basis about work that the church has done. And to be honest with you, if you went through PNS and just and typed in reparations, you will see specific actions that the national church has done. So look upon that list. Are there any of them that you really want me to specific? Because we're not going to have time to go through each one. So again, we mentioned the apology for slavery and reparation.
How do I close this window on?
Yeah, click on it again. In the blue, where it says RGJ09.
Yeah.
Yeah, click on that line up above.
Oh,
yes.
I see. Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That particular resolution was on an apology for the racist closure of a single church in Juneau, Alaska.
Yes, that goes to OGA. So I'm not sure whether how OGA has acted upon that, because we're in PMA, and so I'm not. Yeah, I'm not, to be candid with you, I'm not heard of that specific action being taken, but it also depends on who has the responsibility for it. Because again, even though racial justice falls under our purview, if it's not directed towards us, because we have so many overtures that we work with, I might not be aware of specific actions that have taken. But again, I do want to defend the work of the church, because racial justice, I will dare say, is one of our, if we were to list the top 5 issues that we have been working on the last 5 years, I would say racial justice would be either 1 or 2. We've done things like held out, we posted in front of the church a Black Lives Matter banner that hung from the church for months. We have had conversations with presbyteries and done workshops with congregations on racial justice. It really is, I think, something that is not being just put forth in talk right now. And again, I do think, especially with, we have an African-American state clerk, the head of PMA is African-American, racial justice has been some of their primary issues. And so again, we would probably have to look and see who has that overture responsibility, because we have Irv Joyner. As we look at that first one, it says 02 on murdered Indigenous women and girls. That would fall under the Racial Justice Advocacy Committee. But I would dare say also Irv, that I'm sure Irv has taken some action on. He is our Native American Advocacy Director, and Irv deals with all issues dealing with Indigenous men and women, especially when, a couple of GAs ago, we issued an apology to Native Americans. Irv was one of the key persons in seeing that happen.
What are Two-Spirit people?
It's a Native American term to say that it deals with issues of gender, if my understanding is correct. And it's saying basically like trans people, but you have 2 spirits within you.
And trans and non-binary.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So tell me, what can I talk about?
I mean, he might want to talk about what he prepared. I don't know. The structure.
Yeah. All right. Can I stop this screen share, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I can, as people are thinking about some ways in which we have addressed issues of race in our office since between the 2 GAs. Black maternal health care has been a major issue in the office. Christian, before she left, would do workshops within the church on Black maternal health, also working with our coalition partners, talking about that as well. And Christian, again, in our office, she did our domestic work. Reparations was a major part of her work. As a matter of fact, in the ecumenical and interfaith community in DC, She became one of the experts when you want to talk about reparations. So a lot of our work that is done is not necessarily publicized because, again, our work is to deal with federal policy. And so again, what limits us is that whatever they are working on is what drives what we are working on, even though we do have issues. But with Congress, if there's not a bill up or there's not some pending legislation, they're not talking about that issue. Now, members of Congress do have specific issues they want to work with. Related to this issue was the issue of police reform. We know that out of the Senate about 3 years ago, the Republican Congressman Tim Scott and the Democratic Congressman Cory Booker were talking on a bill for police reform that really did not go anywhere. And to be candid, I think because Scott walked away from it. We were paying a lot of attention to that, hoping that something would come out of that, doing advocacy, encouraging them to continue that work. But right now, pretty much, I think Booker is saying that nothing's happening because Scott is not coming back to the table. And to be candid with you, I think that's because he's running for president. He does not think it would be a key issue with his constituents. And so with the issue of racial justice, HR 40 really is still in committee. Has not passed both houses, which talks about having a conversation about reparations. It doesn't even have any specific demands pertaining to reparations. That's something that we've been pushing for, but it's just not, that bill has been sitting in the House for about 30 years right now. Representative Conyers was the first one to push it each year, and Barbara Lee has picked it up, but it's really hard with the House being in Republican hands right now, I don't think it's ever going to come out of committee. So again, a lot of our work, racial justice is intimate to the work that we do. But again, when you talk about General Assembly, it's so widespread, the responsibility for who carries out what. You really have to figure out what is under the purview of our office and how are we addressing that. But I will say when we know that the violence against Asian Americans has been ongoing in this country, especially since the pandemic. We released a statement in September of 2021, a statement against violence against the Asian American community, encouraging Presbyterians to be very engaged, being advocates in their local community, but also to ask for the outcry from our national leaders against Asian American violence. When COVID first hit, we did a 6-week webinar series on the ways that COVID impacted marginalized communities. All of them were communities of color. I think it started in May of 2020 and went for 6 whole weeks. We started with the African American community, did one on the Native American community, the LGBTQI community, another one on the Hispanic community. And so we have ongoing events that are always happening. The issue is that it's problematic at times to get the word out because one, again, not everyone reads the PNS, the Presbyterian News Services. So we don't have a direct tie-in to each congregation to say that these are the ways in which we are active. And so I would encourage you to send me an email if you're interested in receiving our action alerts, because we will send out action alerts about every month. We will do at least 2 of them on specific issues. And so, but if you're not in our database, you don't get the information from us or our newsletters, things along that line. So I will pause at this time. Are there any questions or any direct issues I can address from anyone?
A question here in the room.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Holly.
Hey, Holly.
How do you reach? I'm always fascinated that we're doing everything online and computers and, we're sending everything out. And yet there's a whole world out there that doesn't have access yet to social media, to computers. So how do we really make a difference in this country when we're addressing everything through electronics?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, communications and media outreach is very difficult. It is very difficult. And I candidly say this to you. The digital world has really increased our ability to spread the message, because now what happens is that once it's online, people can share it with one another. I would say start locally. If you want to talk about on a national level, that's one level of conversation, but I always encourage people to try to have your impact locally, because that's where you're really going to have the ability to communicate. You have a lot of media resources in your local community. It's amazing how many people read letters to the editor. If you write articles for your newspaper, at times they will publish them. And also to use the networks within your congregations. Presbyterians have a network through the presbytery. You also have ecumenical organizations in your presbyteries that will reach out to their different constituents. Now, on the national level, again, when we speak, how do I say this in a fair way? Usually it's the faith community that's listening. If your name is not Falwell or Franklin, the national media does not pay a whole lot of attention. We have press conferences in DC all the time, especially when Trump came into office. There was some type of a statement being issued every week, almost on a daily basis, never carried by CNN, the Washington Post, and we would contact them and make them aware. Now, MSNBC and the Post will oftentimes carry what Reverend Barber does with the Poor People's Campaign, but for the mainline faith organizations, we just don't have the ability, unless we do something radical. I mean, really crazy, sit in on when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, if we take over her office or something along that line. But even then, there's so much happens in DC along that line. They really have become immune to that, to be honest with you. And so I say that to say this, that it's difficult unless you have some type of a relationship with national media. Again, most of our communications are effective in the ecumenical and interfaith, just to be candid with you. So I don't know how to answer that, to be honest with you, because we have tried everything that we can to capture the attention, because we have the best interfaith and ecumenical network in DC I've ever seen in my life. I mean, most of the work that we do in DC is coalition work. We work with the United Methodists. We work with the Islamic community. We work with the Jewish community. Matter of fact, I'm one of the 3 chairs, well, now 2, one person had to leave, for a 70-member organization called WISC, W-I-S-C, which is the Washington Interreligious Staff Community. We had a meeting Friday. We meet once a month to talk about issues that we are working on jointly. And so, but again, no one knows about that but us. And even though we oftentimes will send out press reports to the media, we get very little coverage. So getting the attention, again, Franklin Graham, if he says something crazy, they will report that. If when Falwell, before he was outed at Liberty University, if he said something crazy, they will report that. But when we issue a progressive faith statement, they don't. And so again, it's difficult nationally to do that. Now again, Reverend Barber has the attention of MSNBC, and Time did an article, has to be 4 years ago, on the progressive left, of which we are a part of. We are part of, that's how they label us, the progressive left, saying that the progressive left was trying to regain some field that had been lost to the moral majority movement and to the conservative right. But that's the only thing that I've seen that Time has put out about actions that we have put forth. And again, Reverend Barber is pretty much the face of the progressive movement for justice in this country. So it's difficult, it really is. But I will say that we are very active in trying. Like on Wednesday, I'm going to be part of a national statement that will be made urging Congress to raise the debt ceiling without the cuts that the Republicans in the House. Look forward and see who covers it, and we're sending it out to every media outlet. And it is at 12 o'clock on Wednesday. And I don't think I will, if it's been Zoom live, I'll send you that link, but I know right now we're going to physically be in DC. And so it's an uplift hill. Now, if you know the president of CNN, connect us, because I would love to have a conversation, because I think they're doing the country a disservice by not reporting, because the voice of the faith community is consistent. Almost every faith group has a Washington office. We're not the only ones. We're in the building owned by the United Methodists. They're wonderful partners. Again, the Episcopalians, the Lutherans, the Friends, we all are working actively each day on justice issues.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
A couple of things. One thing, the Washington Post did have an article about the faith community offices this week, but it was not on the front page. It didn't really highlight advances that we made. I'm curious, did the General Assembly make any statements about reproductive rights? What is that position?
Well, specifically, I don't remember specifically, but yes, I think so. But let me say this. Our position has been consistent for the last 50 years. We have always been in support of reproductive justice. There it is, 03, reproductive justice. That's the one on Black maternal birthing. Yeah, see if there's a committee, Steve. And so
that went to the Race and Gender Justice Committee.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but look under the committees and see if there's a reproductive justice committee, because I'm not sure.
Women's.
Yeah, but let me say this again. The church has been consistent, even before Dobbs, even before Roe. We have been advocates for reproductive justice, and so let me say this as well. While we're talking, if you will look up, and I always try to give you resources that the church has. I don't know if all of you are aware that we have a page that lists probably about 2/3 of the documents that we have released over the last 50 years. And it's called Social Witness Policy Statements, PCUSA, Social Witness Policy Statements. And you will see and so we have quite a few on reproductive justice. So for this current environment, we had already had a real strong position on reproductive justice that we have been very consistent in over the years. And I think we are one of the leaders when it talks about the right of a woman to choose. We take very seriously the fact that it is a major decision for any woman to consider having an abortion, but we say that it's a healthcare issue. And oftentimes we don't talk about abortion because it is so controversial. We talk about reproductive justice, that it is an issue of justice for women, of gender justice. And so again, to be honest with you, we were ahead of the curve before Roe was overturned through Dobbs.
Right. Thanks.
John.
Hello, thanks for being here. Would you recommend a route to bring to the attention to PCUSA's attention, an issue that could use our moral authority behind it without having to, travel the roads all the way up through the Presbyterian and so forth? Does it need to go that route?
Well, it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to implement some change, then that's going to be the route that you're going to have to go, because you want it to where it's dealt with at the General Assembly. So, through the session to the Presbytery on up. But if you want to communicate, I would say our communications department. We have an underutilized communication department. They write articles. They put up. They do webinars. And so the issue that we're having again is that very few people are utilizing those routes. And so, but when you see them coming out, so does anyone here get our communications daily briefings that come out? Sign up. There's 3 things I want you to sign up for.
Okay.
Because they were released like yesterday. This morning when I checked my email, what you will get will be, it'll say communication briefing, and you'll probably get 4 links to 4 different articles. And they really are wonderful ways to keep up with what the church is doing. So I think utilizing that network, again, the only downside is that I'm unsure with how many Presbyterians are reading it. But for the ones who do utilize it,
Mhm.
they're usually pretty progressive. They usually are ones who want to find out what the church is doing. And it's a good way of getting the word out on a direct issue. But again, I'm going to say this, and I know this is not necessarily the direction that we're in as far as this conversation is concerned, but work locally. Most of the real change is happening in states and it's happening in local cities. It's so much easier to get, and you know how frustrating it is to try to get something through your city council or get something through your state government. Now we're in Maryland, so Maryland is very progressive as states go, and so we don't have a lot of issues that we have to deal with in Maryland. But states are even with one of the things that I talk about a lot is gun violence, and we know that the federal government is not making any advances. You know, that bill that was passed, what was 2020, about background checks was still pretty weak, because there was a lot of compromise involved. But states are passing very strong laws. Like Illinois was the last state. It was the beginning of this year that Illinois banned semi-automatic weapons in that state. California is one of the safest states that you can live in because California has some of the strongest laws on gun safety. And so, actually, Steve and I were talking about doing something on gun violence beforehand. And I looked over my PowerPoint, and I think I listed about 10 states where there's strong legislation going on. So I always say this: everything that we do in DC starts locally. Starting with the people that you elect to city council, because oftentimes they run for state government as well. And oftentimes state legislators and governors run for Congress. And so the individuals that you are sending to office has an impact. And also, again, it's easier to move things in your local community. And you're going to see, because again, we still are working diligently in DC, but again, with split houses, it's going to be very unlikely that anything of meaning gets passed this year.
John, if you've got an issue, now is the time to get it directly to the ears of church leadership.
Well, there is an organization called BACC, which is the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, that has been working to raise awareness about the fact that and it's an historic cemetery, which frankly, not to mince words, was a veritable dumping ground for the raped and pillaged slave or post-slavery women in the area, is being dug up, and a mini storage is being put there. And as more and more is uncovered, it has been rubber stamped and okayed behind closed doors by the Park and Planning Commission, by the county government in various ways, because of all of the ties to the development community. And it's also unearthed how the land was privatized to begin with, which was through overtly racially discriminatory practices. It's the kind of thing that within a small community is on fire, but getting it a larger mouthpiece has been very difficult.
And John, really, I'm glad you shared that with us, because I was not aware of that. That is an ongoing justice issue that's been addressed in several communities. We know that in New York, this had to be about a decade ago, they were plowing over a parking lot, and they discovered an African graveyard. So in many communities, there's greater, and this is a very relevant issue. And so one of the things that's needed, there is not a network. So someone needs to find ways to connect different communities that are dealing with this issue, because again, I've been in several places where I've seen attention. I know in Henderson, North Carolina, which is where I grew up, interestingly enough, there's also a group that's focusing in on a Black cemetery there. And if I'm not mistaken, there is some federal money. I just need to look it up and find out where for this issue. And I think it has a loose link to environmental justice. But I think it's in Build Back Better, because Build Back Better is wide ranging. and there's a lot of money. And so I would encourage that group to think about trying to establish a national network where they do research on what other communities are dealing with that issue, and also to connect with the organizations in New York dealing with that, because it stopped the entire project, and they have uncovered many African artifacts of the enslaved people who were buried there. And so this is not a new issue. So that's one of the things, again, I say, when you start locally, don't try to do it alone, because there's not any justice issue anywhere in this country where other groups are not engaged as well. The issue is, as you said, that they feel isolated because they're working on it in their local community. But that's one that is gaining traction around the country. But again, not on a national, I don't hear a lot of national conversation about it. Most of it is local conversation.
Thank you. I know that the archaeologist, what is it? The forensic archaeologist that was a part of that team up in New York is associated also with this project, but I don't know that they've been able to build community the way that you're suggesting, and I will do what I can to help them along those lines.
Yeah, and John, I'd say, to be honest with you, that's oftentimes what it takes. You have one individual who's willing to do the research and to see what's out there, because oftentimes we do feel like we're doing this on our own, and we want a network, but oftentimes that network is one person who's doing that work.
Yeah.
I apologize for the top of my head being cut off, and I'm trying to lean into the microphone. Yeah, what else? Let's talk. We got about 10 more minutes. What else would you talk about? I'm gonna keep talking now. I was a preacher for 25 years. I got a lot to say.
Yeah, so maybe you could go ahead and talk about some of the things that you were going to discuss with respect to gun violence. I mean, with all the things that are in the news the last month, that is of importance to us as well.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. As a matter of fact, I'm preaching today on the issue of gun violence. It is, and this is, I think, probably what I figured to be one of the most relevant paths that we need to take. I do think there are two obstacles. One, into making any headway into this issue. In 2005, Congress passed what's called the Protection of Gun Commerce Law, which is a horrible, horrible piece of legislation. And what it does is that it says that as long as the gun was used for what the purpose it was deemed to be used for, shooting, you cannot sue a gun company.
Oh my God.
So and this is unique legislation in this nation.
So
no other industry has
with the original intended use of the gun.
Yes. So if you
shooting people is what a gun is intended to do.
Yes. So if there's a massacre with an AR-15, you cannot sue the maker of that gun company for making that gun, even though it's made to be used by civilians in a civilian environment. And so Adam Schiff from California has a piece of legislation that he's been working on since 2013. One of the things, we need to get that legislation passed. Now, again, it's very unlikely with the Republicans holding the House, but this is something that's not new. So one of the pieces that, in my mind, we've got to do advocacy for the passing of the overturning of that legislation. So the other piece that I would add, and again, there's a little momentum, because at first it was sitting in his back pocket. He's been talking about it since 2013, but it's going before a committee now. And there's been a couple of articles out in 2020 about how it's slowly moving forward. But that's a major piece, because again, I equate this fight with what we talk. I'm sorry I used the word fight. It's not a good analogy, but I equate this call for advocacy with the ways in which we were challenging cigarette companies. Remember back in the 60s and 70s when people were suing the cigarette companies and they were saying, you're wasting your time, you're never going to win. But when that first lawsuit happened, it was a flood of them. And actually, it forced the cigarette companies, forced Congress's hand, and also force cigarette companies to sort of regulate themselves, even though the Congress also acted. And so that's what I'm hoping will happen with gun companies. The other piece is that I do think we've got to focus obviously on legislation and on legislators on the congressional level, but also to focus on gun companies themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting away with murder, literally, and there's no strategy to confront them. We either talk about individual legislators or Congress as a whole, or we talk about the NRA. But the gun companies hide behind the NRA. The NRA is just a front for the gun companies. And as a matter of fact, the NRA is losing support in this country. Membership is down. You know, they had that corruption controversy that's still going on right now, misuse of funds. And so the NRA still holds weight with members of Congress, but it does not have the influence with the American public that it once used to. So we've got to take this struggle directly to gun companies. And one of the things that I was hopeful for that would happen, one of the companies, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting which company this was, but a bunch of teenagers who lived in a local community with a munitions company, they held a protest outside of the company. And that's what we've got to start doing, because these companies basically are hiding behind the NRA in that legislation, and there's no heat on them at all. And so we've got to make them a public pariah. I'll tell you what the fight is going to fight. I keep using that word. What the struggle is going to be was they're saying, well, we promote jobs and things on that line, but we've got to hold their feet to the fire, saying that you are responsible for making automatic weapons that children can now fire, and that there are more companies. We know this. There are more guns on the streets of America than there are people, and it's getting to the point where there are twice the number of guns in America than there are people, and it's just an overwhelming flood. So with the issue of gun violence, I think that there, again, I've said this, but there is headway being made in states. There are quite a few states that have passed very progressive legislation, even though the Supreme Court, you know, they made a ruling against New York not that long ago. But I do think we've got to keep pushing state legislatures, especially that have friendly legislators that are in support of background checks and ending to placing a ban on the selling of assault weapons in this country.
The Sandy Hook families have had some effect here.
Yes.
They did an end run around that protecting gun commerce statute.
Yeah.
By suing, I think it was Remington, on the theory that Remington's advertising was irresponsible and encouraged the mass violence. And they've gotten a huge judgment against Remington.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing,
yeah,
like we saw this week with Fox News and their settlement, that gets companies' attention when it hits their bottom line and it hits their shareholders' bottom line.
Steve, you're absolutely right. And I neglected so they did the end run, and not only did they get that settlement, they got about $73 million from Remington. And they also, the judge forced Remington to release their marketing practices to Sandy Hook family. So if you want to look for an example, you're absolutely right. Look at what Sandy Hook, the families have formed an organization, and they are taking it to the gun companies. And this is not the only lawsuit they have. They have several lawsuits, but you're absolutely right. And I was shocked when they won that lawsuit because of I thought the 2005 law would prohibit them, but you're right, they did an end run. They talk about marketing and not the use of the weapons.
Right. Now, if somebody uses a weapon as a club to kill people,
right,
that's not the intended use of the weapon.
Bludgeoned with a handgun.
That's right. Bludgeoned with a handgun would not be covered here. Yeah. Carol Starr has a question.
I know for years there was some kind of almost legislative lid on research about the implications of gun violence. Has anything happened with respect to that?
There's been a little movement, but you're absolutely right. Congress, for some crazy reason, forbid the CDC, the Centers for Disease and Control, to do any type of research on gun violence in this country. They could not, they still cannot record the numbers of deaths in this country. So and I'm a little hazy, but there's been a little movement, but not much.
Not
because,
much.
yeah, because that's a congressional act, and so the president can't
Yes.
overturn that. But isn't that crazy? The CDC cannot do any research into
Yes.
gun in this country.
And it's the largest cause of death among children 18 and under is gun deaths.
And it's actually increased from that. Right now, not only for children, but for Americans. More people being killed by guns in this country now than car accidents, which was one of the major causes of death in this country. And gun violence is out of control in America. And I close with this because I know we're near the end, but we've got to stop arguing on secular grounds. The office in Washington is the office of public witness. We're witnesses to Christ in the public arena. So we've got to talk about how does our faith inform us on the issue of gun violence, because you're going to lose that constitutional argument. When people start saying, well, the Second Amendment, so we've got to start saying, what does the Word of God say? How does the Bible inform us, especially for people of faith? We cannot argue on that ground because we're going to lose that argument. But we're not here because of that position anyway. We're here because we feel that as a person of faith, we are disturbed by the amount of violence in this country that has affected our schools. Even in the church, churches have security guards now because they're concerned about gun violence. Now, this is a faith matter.
Yes, we do.
We
They're
have one right here, sir.
They're right here.
That's right. And so it's the world we live in. And so we've got to talk about that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And regardless of how you feel about the Second Amendment, that as a person of faith, we feel that even if it infringes upon your rights, then it will save lives. And that's okay. And some rights we need to have less of. So that's my sermon. So
Yes.
Fewer rights and more left.
All right.
Mhm.
Reverend Hawkins, it's always a pleasure to have you here. It's always a challenge. It's always kind of sad to see that the same issues keep arising every time you come to talk with us.
Mhm.
We will have you back. We will continue this dialogue. We will continue to raise new issues, both locally and globally. And we thank you for your support, and we hope we can support the efforts of PCUSA as we move forward.
Yeah, and please plan a trip to DC so we can do a deep dive in some of the things that are being done. I apologize.
It's just a ride down the red line for us.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir, and blessings. And
Thank you. Thanks for
may
having
you
me.
have similar success with your sermon this morning.
Yes, sir. Pray for me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
All right, and next week, folks, we are going locally for our topic, but also globally. The subject is Here Comes the Sun. Listen to the Beatles, and they'll put you in the right frame of mind to talk about the solar panels on the roof here and how you might be able to mimic that at your own home in one way or another. We'll have speakers from the property management lay ministry. We'll have speakers from the county government that help support this, and from the contractor who can talk about both the technology and the really creative and interesting financing arrangements here. So same time, same place, same multimedia, and we will see you all. Blessings on everybody. Enjoy the spring weather, and may your life not be full of pollen.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Wonder about the